Today is the day! We are going to start with the Sugaridoo Bernina Quilt Along. Hi there! Welcome to the Sugaridoo YouTube channel. My name is Irene. And today we are going to begin with the Sugaridoo Bernina Quilt Along. It is so super exciting. If you are here and already signed up and having your kit with fabric ready, just make yourself a cup of tea. I'm going to introduce myself and the project a little bit to people who are new here first. So my name is Irene, I'm from the Netherlands and I'm a quilt designer. And this project that we are going to start today is a quilt along, where you work with quilters from all over the world on the same pattern, and you can choose your own fabrics, of course, or use a kit that I have available in my webshop and make the same quilt together simultaneously with quilters from all over the world. And to connect with each other, we have a Facebook group so you can follow along with each other, and also a hashtag on Instagram so you can check out what everybody is making, and also ask your questions in our Facebook group. So it is a lovely community with thousands of quilters already who joined us in this quilt along. So if you want to join, there is still plenty of time to catch up. Every 4 weeks there will be a new pattern released on the Bernina blog, and also a video to go with it on my YouTube channel. So if you want to join in but can't start right away, just make sure you sign up through sugaridoo.com/call, so you will get all the information about the new patterns in your inbox. And in 4 weeks there will be the second pattern, so you do have some time to catch up if this is a new video for you and if you haven't heard about the project yet. But if you're interested, there is still time. So what we are going to make is a quilt, and it is going to be a real quilt, a big one. It is 70 by 90 inches, so a pretty big quilt, and I'm going to explain everything from a beginner level. So if you're new to quilting and want to learn something, hop on the Sugaridoo Bernina Quilt Along train, because we are going to learn a lot, I think. I'm going to use different techniques and explain them all in written text in English, Dutch and German, and in my YouTube videos here on my YouTube channel. So that's the general information for if you're new here. And if you're here ready to start with the quilt along, I'm going to show you what we will be making today. Oh wait, you already saw this in the thumbnail, of course, but this is what we will be making. We are going to make hashtags. This is the first row in the quilt along, and it's on position 5 in the quilt. So we're also going to mix up the position so that it will stay a surprise until the end of the quilt what the finished quilt will look like. So these blocks are the first one we are going to make, and I'm super excited to get started. I hope you're also excited and looking forward to this. So let's begin with the materials and tools that we need for this row. Let's start with the materials that we need today. So for tools, I have a cutting mat and I have 2-inch rulers, but if you only have one, that's perfectly fine. I'm going to show you how to cut with the big ruler and the small ruler. So but it's important that it's an inch ruler and not a centimeter ruler. So the inch rulers that I have here are 6 by 12 inch, and this one is 6 by 24 inch. Then I have a rotary cutter, and if you're new to quilting and it's your first time using a rotary cutter, when you have a new blade, it is super sharp. So don't cut your fingers, don't cut anything else than your fabric. And make sure that when you take off the safety, when you start cutting, that you always put it back before you place your ruler, your rotary cutter down. So that is the only thing we need for tools. So cutting mat, rotary cutter and an inch ruler. And then I also have some scraps here with which I'm going to show how to sew with the 1/4" seam allowance. So if you're new to quilting and want to learn how to sew with a 1/4" seam allowance, also take some little scraps. And then for the fabric, I'm going to sew with the gray rainbow kit. Here are all the rainbow colors that I'm going to use in the quilt. And dark gray titanium is my accent fabric. And the light gray silver is my background fabric. So for today you will need background fabric. So that is light gray silver for me. You need your accent fabric. That is titanium for me. And you will need the 5th color in your row. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And in our rainbow that is called papaya, Kona cotton papaya. When you're working on the blue quilt and you order the kit, then you should take out your dark gray fabric as your main fabric, so titanium as main fabric, and then the yellow one as accent fabric. And that is what we are going to work with today. If you want to add more accent fabrics or mix up all the fabrics, you can take a peek at the Bernina blog, where I've written down all the instructions to see an overview of where the accent piece will be in each row. So then you will have an idea of where I'm going to place the dark gray blocks or snippets in all the rows, and then you can mix it up a little bit if you want to. I also have my tea, very important, and some snacks. Oh, and of course I have a sewing machine ready and an iron and ironing board. Yeah, so that is everything in place. Let's cut some fabric. I'm going to start by cutting my papaya and titanium fabric, and I just went ahead and give my fabric a nice press. And you want to leave your fabric folded in half. So this is the total width of the fabric, and we're going to just leave it folded in half. That is way easier to cut. So here I have my papaya and my titanium. Let's start with cutting the titanium. If you have a big cutting mat and a long ruler, then you can use the method that I'm going to show you now. So what you want to do is you line up your fabric along a line on your cutting mat, and I'm lining up the fold in the fabric. So I'm lining that up over there, and then making sure that everything is nice and flat. And then you go ahead and take your ruler, and the first thing I'm going to cut is I'm going to square off this side. As you can see, there's a little difference in the fold. So I'm just going to place my ruler lined up with the lines that are running in this direction of the mat, and then I'm going to cut off a little strip. And when you cut, you place your hand on your ruler, or maybe you want to leave off a little pinky to prevent your ruler from sliding that way. So you're going to press down on your ruler and then place your rotary cutter on your mat, and then just gently push and cut, and there it is. So now this line is nice and straight. I always like to flip over my fabric so that I can cut from this side. There we go, I flipped it over. Now you can use two methods, or you line it up with the lines of your cutting mat and use the measurements that are over here to cut your strips. So I need a strip of 2 inch. So here I can measure 2 inch, line my ruler and then cut. But I always like to just use the lines on my ruler, so then I only need to pay attention to my ruler and not to the cutting mat and my ruler. But that's just the thing you prefer. So I will go ahead and place my ruler on the 2 inch mark over here on the side of my fabric. There we go. That's nicely lined up, and then I'll just cut. There we go, that is the first strip, and the rest of your accent fabric piece you are going to fold and store for the next row. So we only need this piece of 2 inch wide. Let me put that aside just for now, so that I can show you how to cut when you only have a smaller ruler. Therefore I use my papaya fabric. And the only thing you need to do different when you only have a smaller ruler, as you can see, this won't fit, so then you can just fold your fabric in half again. And then you will need to use your new fold line to line up your fabric. Oops, let me put that in the screen. So I check if my new fold line is squared with my mat and also my old fold line. There we go. Now I can square this up with a small ruler. There we go. Nice and square. Turn it around. Place your ruler here. And we need 5 strips of 2 inch. So I'm lining it up with my line over here. And then I'm cutting my first strip of papaya. And that's it, your first strip of papaya. We need 5 of those. So I'll just put this away and cut 4 more. We have 5 strips of papaya and 1 strip in our accent color. I'm going to continue cutting strips from my background fabric. And for this row we need 6 strips of 2 1/4 inch wide. I always like to cut everything that I need for a project first and then start sewing. So here we have the strips that we've just cut, and I'm going to cut some of them up in smaller pieces. On the blog, on the Bernina blog website, is a cutting scheme, and that tells me that for the papaya fabric I need 2 whole strips, so those are already done. And then from the other 3 I will need pieces of 8 4/4 inch. So what I'm going to do is first show you with 1 strip how you can do that, and then cut the other strips at the same time. So this is folded in half, and on my cutting scheme I see that from each strip I can cut 4 pieces of 8 3/4. So now I'm lining up my ruler with my strip, taking my rotary cutter and trimming off the edge. So now this is nice and square, flipping it over to this side, and then use my ruler where it says 8 3/4, line up this line over here, and then measure 8 3/4. Here I then have 2 little strips of 2 inch wide and 8 3/4 long. So in total I need 12 of those. So 2. There we go. So this little piece is a scrap, and then I can continue with the other ones. And what you can do if you need to cut a lot of fabric is that you just line up fabric. You can stack it, so you can cut through multiple layers. It's not that you need to do that for this row since we don't have so much to cut, but just want to show you. There we go, just line it up. You do just exactly the same thing, but first you line up the stack of fabric. So now I'm cutting 4 layers of fabric at the same time. There we go. We had 4 over here, plus 4, that's 8. And 8 more, that is 12 of those. That's perfect. So all the papaya fabric is cut. And now for the accent fabric, I need 2 pieces of 7.5 inch and 2 pieces of 8 3/4. So we have 2 pieces of 7.5 and 2 pieces of 8 3/4. There we go, and you can use this strip in another row for your accent fabric. So if you want to hold on to this, that's great, and just put it back on your pile of fabric. Titanium and papaya cut. Now let's go to the background fabric and see what we need of that. We need 3 whole strips of this. I'll just stack that up with the orange because we're going to use that together. 1, 2, 3 of those, and then the other 3 we are going to cut, and we will need 8 pieces of 8 3/4. And in my cutting scheme I can see that from one of these strips I can cut 4 pieces of 8 3/4 and 1 piece of 7.5. So you first just start cutting 8 3/4. That's 1. Well, actually that's 2 because it's folded in half. And then again 8 3/4. And then you can fold this open, use this to cut 7.5. Perfect. So you do want to give this a little press before you start sewing. And let's repeat this for the second row. Whoops. I went too fast. I cut 7 3/4. That's okay. I am just going to use this as 7.5. So now I have 3 pieces of 7.5, and I can probably cut this still as 8 3/4. Yes. There we go. So I already have 3 pieces of 7.5, so that's enough. And then I need to count these. 2, 4, 6, 7. So only need 1 more. Okay, there we go. So here we have all the pieces that we need for today. Now before we start sewing, I like to take a second to talk about sewing with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And what that means is that the seam that you are going to sew with is 1/4 inch. So on your ruler, so it's only to the first line that is 1/4 inch. So it's very small, but in quilting we almost always use 1/4 inch. And with this row that is important because when you would sew with 1/2 inch, your blocks will become smaller. So it's important to first measure that on your machine. If you're already an experienced quilter, just skip a few minutes. But if you're not, and if you're new, please take a moment to learn about this, because it's quite important to get accurate results in your quilting. So for this I'm just going to grab my practice pieces, my little scraps that I cut. Nothing special, just scraps with a straight edge. And you can line those up just so you have 2 fabrics to sew together, and take that to your sewing machine. So we are just going to sew a little bit to see what kind of seam allowance the foot of your machine has. So this is your foot on your sewing machine, and it has an edge on this side. So what I want you to do is just place down your foot, and then sew for a little bit with lining up your fabric and your foot on this side. So what you have here now is your seam, and you can measure this to see if this is actually 1/4 inch. So it depends on the size of your foot, what this is going to be. And of course, you can move your fabric more to that side or more to that side to increase or decrease the size of your seam. But first, go and check if this is a 1/4 inch. So here you can see that's your seam, and here you have your seam allowance. So with this foot, I use a 97D Bernina foot. That is a quilting foot, and that has a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So for my machine it's correct because I'm using a Bernina quilting foot. But what if you don't have a different foot and you just have a beautiful old sewing machine and you want to make something for quilting with a 1/4 inch? Then there's a little trick. And I'm just going to place a different foot on my machine so that I can show you how you can still make a 1/4 inch seam without a perfect foot. So what if you have a different foot? One that does not have a 1/4 inch size. So this foot is bigger. I'm going to show you how to make a guideline on your machine for a 1/4 inch. So for this you need some washi tape or masking tape, your inch ruler, and you need to first turn off your machine. And then I'm just going to remove my foot. So your foot is not in the way of what you want to do. And I'm zooming in to let you see that I have here a little hole, and that hole is for my needle. But that for you that might be bigger or might be wider. But what you want to do, let me place my camera in front of it, is to line up that 1/4 inch line in the center of where your needle is going to go down. And when you've positioned your ruler like this, and you know that it's going to go straight, so it's not lining up like this or like this, but that it's going fairly straight, and there you go, you will take a piece of masking tape to place beside your ruler. And of course you don't want to go into your feed dogs, but you just go, you stop right before them. There we go. That is nice and in place. And when you then start sewing, you can just use this guideline as the place where your fabric needs to go. So you can see that it is not lined up underneath here with my foot, but I'm lining it up over here with my marking, and then I know, even though it's not lined up at the outside of my foot, that it is going to be a 1/4 inch. So that is something that you can do to sew with a 1/4 inch even if you don't have a 1/4 inch foot. Okay, it's time. Are you ready? We are going to start sewing. Take one strip of your background fabric and then one strip of your main fabric. So we're first going to sew together the whole strips, and you're going to fold it open and open, and also the background, fold it open, and take both ends and line them up. I'm not going to pin anything in this video, but if you love to pin, you can go ahead and pin, but with sewing strips you don't really need to. So you're just going to line up those strips for the first part and then put it under your foot. Just going to place it over here. You have your 1/4 inch foot in place, or your 1/4 inch marking on your machine, and then just put the foot down and we start sewing. And while you're sewing, you're going to align your strips. So first I'm just going to sew a few centimeters. There we go, just sewing the first part, and you can just sew in little steps. So you just sew a little bit and then you line up the fabrics, and then you sew a little bit more. Sew a little bit, line up your fabrics again, and then sew a little bit more. let me show you on this side what I'm doing. So there we go. I sew a little bit. And then I just take my fabrics, and don't pull on your fabrics, just place them gently on top of each other, line them up, and then you've lined up this whole bit, so you can place your hands where you've lined them up, and then just sew. Until you're there, and here you see that they're not lined up anymore. So from here I'm just going to line them up again and continue sewing. And then just continue doing this for the whole strip. And if your ends don't match up in the end of the strip, don't worry, that's because there are two different colors, and when fabric is produced it's about the same width, but as you can see it's not exactly, so that's okay. So now we've added our first two strips together, and we want to fold this open, and now we are going to press, and there are different ways of pressing. So you can fold open your fabric on this side and fold open your seam on the other side and press that flat. That's perfectly fine if you want to do that. Or you can fold open your fabrics and press that flat, and that means that you will fold both parts of the seam to one side or both parts of the seam to the other side. So for this project it's okay to just press it the way you want to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it open and press away from the lightest fabric. So in this case that means that my seams will be lying at the orange fabric. So I have my fabric laying here with the orange fabric on top, and then I'm just going to fold it open and finger press it a little bit. So it's folded open, and the seam is not on this side, but the seam is on the orange side. So when you look at the back, the seam is not folded towards here, but the seam is folded towards the orange part. So that's the way I prefer to do it in this block and in this row. Yeah, so go ahead and press open the whole seam. First finger press and then use your iron, and then we're going to add the third strip. There we have our first two strips sewn together, and now we're going to add 3 more strips. So we're going to have alternating colors. So we have silver, papaya, silver. So we have 2 more strips of silver. So first we're going to add a silver, then we're going to add a papaya, and then we're going to add another silver. So we combine the 5 whole strips together. And the final strip, a grey one. And there we have all 5 strips sewn together. So this is what you should have now. So alternating silver, papaya, silver, or your background and then your main fabric is in the center. So I'm going to press this open for the last time, and then we can continue, and we're going to cut this up. So this is what we made, a alternating strip of 5 strips. And now it's time to cut this up into little pieces. I'm going to use my smaller ruler and line that up with these lines on the inside. And just trim off the edge. So I'm just trimming off the edge of the strip so this is nice and straight. Then you can go ahead and flip around your strip. Take your ruler. And then we're going to cut 18 pieces of 2 1/4 inch. But if you first want to try to finish one of the blocks, just only cut 3 of these pieces. So I'm going to cut 3 pieces of 2 1/4 inch. 1, 2, 3. There we have it, and there is almost our first block finished. Because we're going to use these 3 pieces to lay them out, and take 2 of the pieces in your main fabric that you've cut and put them in between. And there is your very first hashtag block finished. So here you have almost our first block, and we're going to do the same as we just did, but then with these strips. So I'm just going to take the first 2 and line them up, and I'm going to sew this together. So I've lined up one of the orange pieces with one of the striped pieces, and I'm going to line this up and press it and then come back to you. Oh look, see, this is already starting to look like something. So these 2 are sewn together, and I've pressed again towards the orange side. So then these seams still lay nice and flat. So now you just continue and add all the strips to this part. So first this one, then when you're done you're going to add this one, and then this one, and then your block is done. And there it is, our very first block of this quilt along. Quite a special block. This is the very first block that's going to go in your quilt. And especially if you're a new quilter, maybe this is the very first block that you've ever made. So it doesn't matter if your block is a little bit wonky or if there's imperfections in there, that's totally fine. I just wanted to take a second to say that this quilt is not about being perfect and being absolutely accurate. This quilt is to practice and to learn new things, to meet new friends in maybe our Facebook community or on Instagram via the hashtag. That is what this quilt is about. It's not about being accurate, it's just about learning, because when you never make your first block, your first row, your first quilt, you're never going to make a second one. And I guess that's so very true. I see that in many things that I do too, that when I first try it I want it to be perfect, and maybe then I give up because it's not perfect. But please just go ahead and practice with this row, this quilt, because I'm absolutely sure that you're going to do fantastic and that you are going to get better and better along this year, along making this quilt. Okay, so now we have only one block and we want to make a whole row. So you're going to go ahead and keep cutting pieces from this strip, pieces that are 2 1/4 inch wide. So we needed 18 from what we saw in the pattern. So now I've already cut 3, so I need 15 more. So you can go ahead and cut this up into 15 pieces and then sew 5 more blocks in your main fabric. And when that is done, I'm going to show you how you sew the block in your accent fabric. All the blocks in the main fabric are done, so we can put those aside for a little bit. And now we're going to take the 2 smaller strips of your accent fabric and 3 smaller strips in your background fabric. and we're going to sew this together like we did with the long strips in background and papaya. So you're going to sew this together so that we have an alternating strip. There we go, our mini striped block, just enough to make one block. So we're going to square this up and cut 3 pieces of 2 1/4 inch. And 3. There you go. And now you take the longer strips in accent fabric. And there we have another block, but then in titanium. And there we have also our block in accent fabric done. So now I have 6 blocks in my main fabric and 1 in my accent fabric. And now we are going to put the row together. So for that we have these strips left that we cut in our background fabric of 8 3/4 inch. And that is just as long just as wide as our blocks are. So we're going to sew this together. So we do 1 block, 1 strip, 1 block, 1 strip, 1 block, 1 strip. So you will have 7 blocks, and also on the outsides of the blocks there will be strips. The accent block will be placed at the 1 to last. So you will have all these lined up, and then 1 gray one, and to finish off 1 papaya one. So this is the penultimate block, the first to last block. And it doesn't matter on which side you sew the accent block, because you can just flop the whole row around and then it's on the left side or the right side of your row. Yes, exciting, we're almost done. So I'm just going to show you quickly how I sew those strips in between, because you can sew them like this. So where you have the strips that you added last upwards, or you can sew it like this where you have the strips horizontally, and I just like it better when it's horizontally, but it doesn't matter at all, because I think when the quilt is done and when you quilt it, you don't see it anymore. But I'm going to place all my blocks like this, but you can mix it around if you want to. So now every block has a little strip added to it. And now you just want to pay a little attention to what order you're going to do. So now you just want to go block by block, so you keep in mind the order of the blocks. So this is going to be on the far left of the row, and I'm going to add this one to it. So when that's added, I'm going to add this one to it, and then I'll continue until I have only these 2 blocks left. So let's say these are all added into one big row. Then I'm going to add my accent block. It's going to go over there. Then this block. And then finally my final strip. And then the whole row is done. And it is done. The first row of our quilt along. It is the row in precision 5 on our quilt called hashtags, and it is finished. Are you proud of yourself of making this first row? I really hope you are. I am super happy with how it turned out. It is big, huh? So now you really have a feeling of what big of a quilt we are going to make. But I'm sure you will do fine, and don't worry about quilting this whole big quilt in one part, because I'm also going to show you how to quilt it in multiple parts, and then after that assemble the quilt, so that you can also do the quilting itself on a small sewing machine. But first we are going to make 11 more rows for the quilts. So here we have the first one. I'm super happy with it, and I hope you are too. If you have any questions about making the row, you can leave them in the comments down below. But we have a whole community on Facebook, and there all the quilters help each other. So when you have a question, in no time you will have an answer if you put your question on the Facebook group. So of course you can leave a comment here, but it might take longer for you to get an answer in the comments down below this video than when you put them in our Facebook group. As for the links to the Facebook group and to the patterns, you can all find them in the description of this video below. And also everything is summarized on sugaridoo.com/QAL. So when you go to sugaridoo.com/QAL, then you will find all the information assembled there. Also, you will find the newsletters that are already sent out. So if you just signed up to the Quilt Along, you can see the old newsletters that were sent out previously also on sugaridoo.com/QAL. And also, when you want to sign up for the Quilt Along, it's completely free, and you can also do that on the sugaridoo.com/QAL. So that's it. That is it for today, for the first video. And yeah, many more fun rows to come. So enjoy sewing this row, and I hope to see you again in 4 weeks when we are going to do the second row of the quilt. Oh, and also, if you have questions, I did one live video in the Facebook group, and that was a lot of fun. So a week after this video is launched, there will be a live in the Facebook group. So a live video where you can ask me questions, and I hope to answer many of them. So that's it. That's all for today. And thank you so much for watching. I'm enjoying this quilt along so much, and we only just started. Hope to see you again next time. Bye!